So, do you see there's a transition here from historic states or powers that were actually battling each other, Xerxes in Persia attacking Greece, and then the city-state or the nation-states of Greece, the king of the north and king of the south, and pagan Rome, and then it transitions now into spiritual application. This transition happens at the time when Christ is crucified and rises again, and the gospel goes to the world, and now we find that spiritual, literal things of Old Testament times have spiritual application after the cross. For instance, Babylon was a literal nation in Old Testament times, but in Revelation, Babylon does not refer to a nation anymore. It refers to a system of confusion and false beliefs. And so this is how this is transitioning at this point. Thursday's lesson takes us into Daniel 11, 40 to 45. And there are a variety of interpretations for these texts. And we really want to keep in mind now this where we live today as we read about the king of the north and king of the south, and hopefully I can make this clear to you. We're not actually talking about literal nations anymore. We're talking about systems or movements that are warring. So, but the historic view, there, in the November 2019 Adventist Review, there was an article that summarized a theological conference that was held in Barron Springs, and I've got the reference in the notes, that discussed the three different primary views on Daniel 11. And particularly these verses. The historic view that came from Uriah Smith is that the king of the north represents Turkey and the king of the south represents Egypt. That's the historic view. And he wrote about that in 1884. And the king of the north represented by the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, and or potentially some are saying a reincarnated caliphate in Turkey at the end of time, posing the king of the south, which is Egypt. That view is really not that popular. That's a historic view, but not really that popular today. The next two views are actually more popular. The second is the most, but the third is gaining some popularity. And the second is that the king of the north is the papacy, and the king of the south represents atheism. And the second position takes the point that this is a time of the end. At the time of the end, these are these two powers that are warring, and historic Babylon becomes spiritual Babylon. Historic Israel becomes the church, which is the people of God, or the heirs of Abraham. Thus, although the position identifies historic actors, from verse 23 onward, these historic actors no longer are considered earthly powers as far as nation-states go, and not acting in the city of Jerusalem, but rather represent spiritual powers that manifest in earthly realities. The papacy is the king of the north, and then at 1798, the powers of atheism arising. And they would identify this as the French Revolution. And in 1798, the end of the 1260-year power, if you remember, the French Revolution rejected God and put up the goddess of reason. And they are the ones that went in and gave if this atheism is the king of the south, it attacks the king of the north, which is the papacy, and it goes in and gives a wound at that time by taking the Pope captive and breaking the papal powers over the nation states of Europe with the Napoleonic general Beffer, who went in and did that. And so this is how they would see king of the north being, and I call it king of the north, my own view is false Christianity rather than papacy, because I think it extends beyond Catholicism to all Christianity that is infected with the imperial view of God as a dictator and the source of punishment. So, but regardless, this atheistic power who rejects God, it's a goddess of reason, there is no God. Atheism coming out of this is what goes in and gives this wound to the king of the north, which is the papacy. This is how this view is thought. I expand, and again, including all of Christianity that embraces and promotes the false law construct. And I see this as a false Christianity being the king of the north fighting against atheism, humanism, and progressivism as the king of the south. And the king of the north suffered a defeat by atheism for a period, and it's not just the papal powers, in my view. Christianity has suffered a defeat for the last 100 years by atheism in the Western world, and this has been damaging. But if you read the Bible prophecy, the king of the north is going to strike back against the king of the south and destroy the king of the south. Okay? In the book, The Great Controversy, one of the founders of the SDA Church wrote the following. It's page 269. The great city in whose streets the witnesses are slain and where their dead bodies lie is spiritually Egypt. Of all, remember, we're king of the south in these prophecies is identified as Egypt. Okay, in Daniel 11. So here we're spiritually Egypt. Of all the nations presented in Bible history, Egypt was most boldly denied the existence of the living God and resisted his commands. No monarch ever ventured upon more open and high-handed rebellion against the authority of heaven than did the king of Egypt when the message was brought by Moses. In the name of the Lord, Pharaoh proudly answered, "Who is Jehovah that I should hearken unto his voice and let Israel go? I know not Jehovah, and moreover I will not let Israel go." This is atheism, and the nation represented by Egypt would give voice to a similar denial of the claims of the living God and would manifest a like spirit of unbelief and defiance. The great city is also compared spiritually to Sodom. The corruption of Sodom is in breaking the law of God and especially manifests in licentiousness. And this city, and this sin, was also to be preeminent characteristic of the nation that should fulfill the specifics of the Scripture. So this is the French Revolution, rejecting God completely, creating the goddess of reason that they worship for 3.5 years or something over there, or declared. Now, does anybody know a nation today that has the goddess of reason? Let's say appreciated and valued and put in images and shared all over and becomes an actual symbol of the nation.
Yeah.
Anybody know? Seriously. Goddess of reason, created by the French and given to this nation as a gift from the French. Pardon? The Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty is actually the goddess of reason. Did you not know that?
No.
Yes. Yes, it was given as a gift from the French. Well, that's what it is. It's the goddess of reason, holding up the light of reason.
The light bearer.
The light bearer of reason. And it's also feminine.
Right.
Okay? They rejected, this whole thing was a rejection of God's design. And so you could connect now that the goddess of reason, which is atheism, which is humanism, which is progressivism, is now the god of the Western societies.
So did France give that to the United States with that in mind?
You'd have to, plumb the depths of the particular politicians. I don't know if the French did, but I think there were forces behind the scenes that clearly were.
Huh.
So, could we extend this beyond the literal France and French? And can you see that there's a bigger battle going on? It's a worldwide battle between the king of the north, not Christianity, as Jesus represented it, false Christianity, corrupted Christianity, penal legal Christianity, authoritarian Christianity. This is the king of the north. You understand in Bible symbolism, where does God reside? Where did Satan in Isaiah want to establish his throne? In the heights of the north. Okay? So the north is symbolic of where God resides, and this is why Satan is always wanting to take over the north. And many of the myths and fantasies have various mythical people coming from the north, like Santa Claus at the North Pole. Okay? Because the north is where God actually reigns, and Satan wants to take that over. So this system of representing the king of the north would be a system that actually claims to represent God. It would not deny God. It would claim to be God's representative, or act for God, or even speak for God, or even be God. This is false Christianity with its corruption. We'll get into it. The king of the south would be the opposite of that. This is Egypt represented, which is atheism, which denies the existence of God. Now, if you look over since 1798, the battles between these two ideas. So here's what I see happening through history. Christ came in human form, presented the truth about God, and procured the remedy to sin. Approximately 2,000 years ago. The apostolic church embraced this truth, and the gospel spread, and many pagan, non-God-believing people were converted to Christ over the next several hundred years, and the church spread throughout the Roman Empire, the true church. Satan counterattacks, though, with an infection to Christianity of imperial law. God's law functions like human law. God runs his universe like Caesar runs Rome. God makes up rules, and God is the enforcer of rules. And everything becomes penal legal. And God runs his government like humans run their government. And thus, Christianity becomes false Christianity at this point, the system of imperialism. And the world goes into an age of darkness. And it's not simply that they begin using Satan's methods of coercion by the king of the north now having crusades down into the Holy Land to attack and so forth. Okay, it's not just burning at the stake, it's not just inquisitions, but imperial law led to the infection of the spirit temple with all types of really bizarre darkening of the mind stuff, from the magic of the Eucharist to the holy ground that you must be buried in. If you're not buried in holy, this ground is holy, and if you've committed suicide, you can't be buried in holy ground. All kinds of weird things like this. A purgatory, indulgences, denial of science. No, Galileo, the earth does not revolve around the sun, because we've read the scripture and we know it's not that way. A denial of science. And this led people who actually studied. And so understand, imperial law, imposed law, is not connected to reality. It's just made up. God's laws, design laws, are how reality is built. So now we're going to have tension arising in human history. We're going to have people who are observers of nature, studying nature. And we would call those people today scientists. Okay? So as the scientists come along and they actually start studying nature, Galileo, for instance, they're identifying constants in nature, laws that never change. They never vary, because God never changes and his laws never vary. And they're comparing that to this system of arbitrary, crazy stuff coming out of a Dark Ages church that rejected God's design law and made up a bunch of rules. And what happened is they found reality in life doesn't actually work like these people say. Reality in life works like nature reveals it to work. And so now we have this rejection of God, because God is presented as an arbitrary dictator that doesn't make sense and is contradictory to how reality and nature actually works. And now we have then the king of the south, atheism, attacking the king of the north, false Christianity, and saying, saying this, there is no God. And we see what's happened over the last 200 years. What's happened over the last 200 years? Who's been winning in Western society?
Secularism, atheism.
Secularism, humanism, atheism is winning because Christianity has still been embracing and trying to promote Christianity through this imperial law lie. This led to the science, which is based in God's book of nature, rejecting that form of Christianity. But today, I'm going to just tell you, as science is advancing, many scientists, through studying the laws and what they're discovering in science, are actually coming back to a belief in God. The king of the north is ultimately going to win again. And we're talking about scientists who study the human genome. And they look at life and they realize that while you can have these theories about how natural forces might have exploded in some way and created certain physiological molecules necessary for life, there is no humanistic natural theory on how you can get complex coded information, which is in your DNA. So it's not just the molecules have to exist. Those molecules have to be coded precisely to transmit information, data. It'd be like, okay, we have the letters of the alphabet. They just, through storms and raging seas and lightning, the rocks were honed and broken and brittle, and eventually, over the millions of years, some of those rocks formed letters of the alphabet. Okay, so you've got the letters of the alphabet. Does that mean because you have the 26 letters of the alphabet that are now here and available, that naturally, all by themselves, they form the Encyclopedia Britannica? It's just not possible, and scientists know this. So now many scientists are going, there has to be some intelligence out there. But they can't reconcile with Christianity, because Christianity still teaches this arbitrary, nonsensical dictator God who operates contrary to how reality works. But my point is, science is where we're at. It's leading many of them back to a belief in God. So we have a remnant church that is called, at this time in history, to oppose both the king of the north and the king of the south. The remnant church with the three angels' message gives an eternal gospel that God is not like this imperial dictator the king of the north says. He is the creator. He's the builder of reality. And it also opposes the king of the south that says there is no God. Yes, there is a creator, and he built reality run on design laws. And so the message of the three angels of this remnant church is a message that will actually oppose both king of the north and king of the south. Thoughts about that?
Well, our remnant church has been teaching false.
So if you think about this, the king of the north and the king of the south, throughout this prophecy, is their primary goal to destroy each other. Do you think that's what their primary goal is? Or was the primary goal to destroy the people living in the Holy Land? God's people. We'll come back to that. Let's go to the third example, and then we'll unpack this more. So we had first one is Turkey and Egypt. King of the north is Turkey, king of the south is Egypt. 2, papacy and atheism. I like this one very much. The third potential interpretation is king of the north is papacy, king of the south is Islam. And Islam, of course, you can see that the king of the north, and they take and unpack the attacking back and forth as the Crusades in Jerusalem, and the Christians had it at one point, and the Islam has it, and it goes back and forth, and currently Islam has it. And if you read the Bible prophecy, there'll be one more striking back where the king of the north, which is now Christianity. They don't view this as false Christianity. They view this as Christianity, that Islam is going to make one more king of the attack. And some people predict that Islam is going to attack and have an explosion, a bomb, a nuclear weapon, a dirty bomb against the papacy in Rome. They're actually going to blow it up. Islam is going to blow up the papacy, the Vatican. And that will trigger all the Christian nations to go and destroy the Islamic states around the world. This is what some people are predicting. I'm not saying Adventist people here, but I've seen this online. Has anybody else seen this?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't like this view as much. I think I can see where people have it, and perhaps there's some element to it. It's not my favorite view, though. Do we agree, though, that in the prophecy of Daniel 11, there is a transition from imperial Rome to Christian Rome in the prophecy? And we go from literal states to these more global powers represented by king of the north and king of the south. If we're correct in this, it takes us beyond the local region of Palestine to a worldwide problem. Thus, when we read Revelation about the Battle of Armageddon, we don't get caught up into the stories about there's going to be a battle in a little tiny area of the Middle East called Palestine. We understand the Battle of Armageddon is a worldwide battle for the hearts and minds of people. So this prophecy takes us beyond Palestine to something that's going on worldwide. It's no longer about genetic descendants of Abraham, but spiritual descendants. Those who have faith like Abraham are children of Abraham. So it's not genetic descendants being harassed in Palestine, but God's people being harassed by the two sides. The king of the north representing false Christianity, and the king of the south representing atheism or Islam. And our Christian folk, the good Christian people who are really on God's team, are they also harassed by both sides? The penal, legal, oppressive Christianity, as well as the atheism or even Islam. I think, so maybe the king of the south represents both atheism and Islam together. What is the impact upon God's people of these conflicts? So the question, does Satan use the two sides against each other? This is my theory. Satan uses the king of the north, false Christianity, and the king of the south, either atheism or Islam, to fight against each other, not to destroy each other, but to trick Christians into choosing one of those two sides. Side with the king of the north, or side with the king of the south. Pick a side. And in whichever side you pick, king of the north or king of the south, you're choosing to pick Satan's side, because they're both his. That's what I really think is going on. Let me give you some examples. Could we get caught up in a conflict of whether we should have prayer in schools, in public schools? Christianity promoting prayer in schools versus atheism opposing prayer in schools. Could this lead to good Christian folks, good-hearted Christian folks, being tricked into choosing the side of the king of the north, false Christianity, that would seek to force its religious views upon others through the power of the state while denying the liberty of those who don't want to have prayer in schools? Could you see that possibility? Could you see other good Christian people who recognize the principles of liberty as being godly and being tricked into siding with the king of the South, atheism, and promoting a system that denies God and indoctrinating generations of children into a false belief system that hardens their heart against God and makes it harder for them to come to know God? So regardless of which side, if you pick either side, let's have prayer in our public schools, let's not have prayer in our public schools, you've been tricked. Possible?
Yes.
Yes.
Come on, people.
Yeah. So what would an answer be? If you're going to apply the godly principles, what would an answer be to solve that problem?
Follow your conscience.
Well, my solution would be, if you live in a society where that society determines legislatively that their citizenry are required to go to school and be educated, not all societies do, but if the society determines you must be educated, then I would recommend the society provide the resources to the families and let the families choose the schools. We call that a voucher, by the way. And the state will regulate the basic academic requirements that schools must meet in order to be able to receive the voucher. So there's certain academic standards, but the state will not be involved in any way in what religion people are being taught in those schools. So some kids may be sent to an Islamic school, some may to a Jewish school, some may go to a Christian school, some may go to an atheist school. But guess what? The state's not involved in promoting. Families are choosing where their kids go. And so it's a very simple solution. You will find that solution gets a lot of opposition. How about this one? And prepare yourselves. Hold on. I want everybody to take a chill pill before I even say this. What about getting caught up in the conflict over abortion? Now, this is not, all you people online, about whether abortion is right or wrong, any more than my previous example was about whether prayer was right or wrong. It's not a debate about whether prayer is right or wrong. It's about what methods do you apply in pursuing prayer. This is a question about what methods you apply on the abortion question. About whether we get tricked into using Satan's method to achieve God's goal. That's the real problem here. So could good Christian folks who value life and want to protect it get tricked into siding with the king of the north, false Christianity, and seek to pass laws to force people to practice their moral views regardless of circumstances? Could that happen? Oh, how about this one? Could ideas be put forth by good Christian folks aligning with the king of the north that say, we believe that every child is a gift of God? I hear this over and over again. Over and over again. And could such rhetoric confuse people who don't know God, such as children, adolescents, or young women who've been raped or sexually abused or assaulted and become pregnant, and they look and ask the question, was rape the gift that God gave me? Because I was told that all children are a gift of God, and I got pregnant by rape. Is that God's gift to me? No. Could good Christian people get tricked in siding with the king of the north to promote false views about God? How about on the other side? Could other people, good-hearted, I will say this time, good-hearted people who care about others, may or may not be Christian, recognize the principles of liberty and side with the king of the south? They might even go as far as to say there is no God. It's just your body. Make any choice you want. And in so doing, lead some, notice my word here, some, not all, some women to make choices they later regret. Do you see the trap again? How about this one? Any comments about that? You guys are awful quiet today.
She's scared of me.
You brought up the Scarlet A.
The Scarlet A. Could it lead Christians and Islamic Muslims to conflict? Could those who value Christian principles be tricked by the king of the north to believe that it is godly to use physical might and power to go to war against those who are a threat, and we should eradicate Islam because it's the religion of terrorists? Could millions of good-hearted people be tricked by the king of the south, in this case Islam, into believing America and Christianity are the great Satan and they should use whatever means necessary to kill the infidel? Any thoughts? Did you think about all this when you're reading about King of the North and King of the South? But this is the real thing we're supposed to look. When you have spiritual application, understand the temple that is being defiled. We talked about this king is going to seek to defile the temple, this power, this king of the north. How does he do it? By setting himself up in God's temple. How does he do it? By getting you to believe God is like a Roman Caesar and how he governs. And therefore, if God is that way, then it's godly to use power to punish sinners. And this is how historic Christians could do some of the most atrocious things in history. And I would tell you that if certain Christians in this world got unfettered reigns of power, they would do the same thing today. So we allow the prophecy to go beyond Palestine and the genetic descendants of Abraham to encompass the entire world. Do we recognize that neither the king of the north nor the king of the south is part of God's kingdom? That means you can't side with either one and be in God's kingdom. This is the trap. And I will tell you, I think many Christians are being trapped by the king of the north. False Christianity, imperial Christianity, Christianity that seeks to enforce its way upon others because they think it's a righteous act to do. So how do we stay faithful to God while these two forces are fighting each other and you're being recruited to choose sides? And you are being recruited every day. If you watch anything or read anything in today's media, you're being recruited constantly. Many of the pastors and preachers are constantly. You listen to Christian radio, I'm telling you, you're being recruited. You're being propagandized. If you don't have discernment, and what does the Bible prophesy about that? If it were possible, even the elect would be deceived. So are you seeing that you're being recruited? So the question, how do you maintain faithfulness to God while the two sides are actively recruiting you to pick one side? Yes.
First, you have to understand that God's law is design law. And when you accept God's laws as design law, then you can understand that it's truth, love, and freedom that are the most important. And so one of the very amazing things about this, when this country was formed, is they specifically separated church and state. So that the church people would have freedom to do what they thought was right, and the state wouldn't interfere. And so when we see the Constitution and that principle being threatened, then we need to do what we can to maintain freedom, even if it means that we allow bad people to do bad things. The important thing is freedom, 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 because God gives us freedom.
I love where you're going with that, and I think this is absolutely essential. If we're not going to be pulled into either side, that we first have an understanding of God's character, methods, and principles, meaning his design laws. If we don't understand his laws and how they work, if we actually buy into the idea his laws work like human laws, we are already on the side of the king of the north. Because that's how his system works. And then it's just a matter of identifying the right rules. And that's where all the denominations come from. The denominations come because they're, well, you say it's baptism by sprinkling. We know the right way is immersion. And it's all arguing the right rules. And if you get the right set, then you've got your checklist. You had 99 right, but that last 100th one, you didn't wash your feet right.
On the right day.
On the right day. Therefore, you didn't get all the checklists done on the right rules. You didn't keep the right rules. You're still guilty. That's the king of the north. How do we identify? Now, understand, everybody agree with me now as I point this out, that the king of the north and the king of the south are both agencies of Satan. He can't join either one and be on God's side, if you see that. Then how can we consistently and reliably identify the movements of Satan, whether it's the king of the north or the king of the south? How can you say, that's not godly, that's Satan's kingdom? What can you use consistently to identify that?
Their methods.
Yes, the methods they use. The methods they use. Satan's methods always come along. And you can look at the temptations of Christ. Method number one, or in Eden, method number one is deceit. He tried to deceive Christ, even quoting Scripture to do so. It's always deception. If deception doesn't work, what's the next method he used on Christ? Coercion. No, wasn't coercion.
Fear.
Inducement.
Lies were the first method. What was the second method?
Fear.
Not fear.
Selfishness.
You're getting closer. It's playing on selfishness. That's right. Inducement, the bribe. All the kingdoms of the world I will give to you. I will pay you richly to side with me. And fear was in there too. You won't have to then go through this suffering. You have the shortcut route to your goal, to govern the world. Just recognize me and you won't have to suffer to get there. I'll just bribe you. So lies, inducements, and then the third, coercion. Always ends up coercion. Never leaves you free. But that doesn't mean Satan starts with coercion. He certainly could. It doesn't have to come in that order. But typically he starts with lies. Some type of deception. That's our modern media. I will just tell you. If you don't have discernment when you listen to the media, it is constantly trying to deceive you. Constantly. I would love to do a class maybe sometime where we just took headlines, and just go through them and show you the lies embedded, how they phrase things. They phrase things in a way to create a false narrative in your head. The rhetoric that is used is designed to propagandize over and over again. It's very corrupt. And if you don't have discernment skills, then you read things and you think you know something, but you actually don't know. So lies. So you look at the methods being used, and Satan system will always also use the human law model. Pass some rule, pass some law, and then coercively enforcement, threat of punishment. The system will always get there. Remember what it says about the beast of Revelation. When it finally starts using its power, how does it use its power? No one can buy or sell, say him who has the mark of the beast. Coercion. We call those today economic sanctions. That's what that is. It's an economic sanction. You cannot do economy. You can't buy and sell. You can't trade unless you accept our mark. And what beast leads the world in that, according to Revelation? What nation? And which nation is the economic powerhouse? It's getting stronger. We are getting stronger. I can tell you with this current administration, our trade position has gone significantly up. We have much more economic power in the world than we had prior. Which means we can bring more economic pressure to bear on people in the world than we ever could before. Yes?
And that's the problem with vouchers, is because they're afraid that federal dollars will then go along with federal legislation against us. You know, we're afraid to take the federal dollars because the federal government can tell us whatever they want us to do.
So that would be a concern that would have to be built into the legislation, that the money goes to the parents, the voucher goes to the parents spend it, and they can only spend it at schools that meet certain academic requirements, but it's explicitly restricted from enforcing any religious or... So that would have to be how it was originally set up. Because you're right, if that wasn't the case, then after you start taking it, they come along and say, oh, well, you don't allow same-sex couples at your school, then you can't have these vouchers anymore. So it would have to be set up to protect against beliefs that would go contrary to certain politically correct concepts in our. But that's the beauty of it, really, though. Why should we be offended if some parents have certain religious beliefs that marriage is between a man and a woman and others see it differently? This is the part of liberty. One of the things that you'll find in our society as well is that from the progressive left, there is this constant screaming of oppression and unwillingness to give them freedom. The constant screaming, while at the same time they don't want to give other people freedom in their world to do the way they think and the way they want to raise their children to believe it differently. You're not free to do that. You need to teach them what we think is right. So while they demand freedom for the way they want to live their lives, they're not willing to give freedom to people on the other side. It's very corrosive, and thus they allege that you're the abuser of freedom. This is classic Satan's, another one of Satan's methods. Not only is it lies, Satan does evil, and then he projects the evil back on God. He blames God for it. Watch for this in society. Watch for it. You will find certain sectors of our society doing very corrupt things, but then blaming the other side and accusing them of actually the source of it.
It's everywhere.
Okay? It's constant. Constant. So watch for it. So we identify the movements of Satan by looking for his methods. And that requires that you first ground yourself in Scripture, understand God's nature, understand his character, understand his methods, understand his design laws. Come back and test those. God always uses truth presented in love while leaving people free. We leave people free. Maybe we should have this conversation. Where does your freedom end? Where mine begins. Where's that line? And I will tell you that the whole question, if we're going to come back to the whole question on the abortion, is the two views on where life begins. That's where it's all, because this is where Donald Trump really exposed certain cognitive problems with the pro-life community. When he was running for president in 2016, one of his rallies, he said that we should pass legislation to prosecute women who get an abortion because they're murdering children, and we should put them in prison. He said that. It's public record. One time. Because there was a backlash against that. Where do you think the backlash came from? From the pro-choice community or the pro-life community? Not from the pro-choice. The pro-choice didn't say anything about it. The pro-life community just came down on him with a rabid crushing, do not, stop, no, we will not. Why not? Why? You guys have heard the tragic stories, multiple cases. Susan Smith, 25 years ago or whenever it was, approximately, I don't know, 20 years ago, had 2 children, put them in a car, ran them into the ocean and drowned them because her boyfriend didn't want the kids. Does anybody pro-life or pro-choice argue that whether she should be prosecuted or not? No. Everybody recognizes it. We hear the stories all the time of children, babies, who have been killed after birth. Nobody argues whether they should be prosecuted. And that because we understand that's murder of another person. Your freedoms end where that person's begins, right? Well, why would the pro-life community not want to prosecute women who get abortions? Why wouldn't they? Seriously, why? They should.
They don't really believe
That is the argument that some make, that the pro-life community truly don't believe that the unborn are really people. If they believed it, then they would prosecute them, just like there's no question, black and white. You see an infant, like that infant over there, and someone killed that infant, there's no question that person should be prosecuted. But there is question, not in the pro-choice community, in the pro-life community there's question about that. And that's because there really isn't clear, authoritative resource that tells you when a fertilized egg actually becomes a person. There's no authoritative resource that tells you that. It's all up to your perspective and opinion. And that's where freedom comes in. I'm not here to tell anybody anything other than God's methods are truth, love, and freedom. And when you begin coercing people, and so our freedoms end where somebody else's begins. So I don't have the freedom to tell you what to do with your life. But if you begin injuring other people by your behavior, then in love, if I love you and you're injuring other people, what action will I take?
Appropriate restraint.
Restraining power. Not coercive power. Not to say do this or else, but because when you understand design law, what happens in the mind, heart, character of the person perpetrating evil? Sears their conscience, warps their character, hardens their heart. If you love that person, you restrain them. Even if they don't convert, you still minimize damage to themselves, you limit it, and damage to others. And hopefully, and there are many, many stories of people who were out there perpetrating evil, doing crimes, acting to exploit others for their own selfish gain, that got put in prison, restraining power. And in prison, they had time to reflect. Prison ministries met with them, and many have given their hearts to the Lord, and they came out different people. That is not punishment, seeking to exact vengeance. That is redemptive power, seeking to stop a person from destroying themselves and give them opportunity for repentance. Do you see the difference? That's what love does. Love actually steps in to restrain, to stop the perpetration. And by the way, what's the definition of evil? Do you understand evil and sin are not the same thing? Sin is a condition of being out of harmony with God's design. All nature groans under the weight of sin. Animals and plants now have thorns and toxins because the nature has been corrupted out of harmony with God's original design. Animals are predatory now, and they will kill each other for survival. This is not how God designed it. But these animals are not evil. Plants are not evil. But they're corrupted by sin. What is evil?
Exploiting others for selfish gain.
Correct. Evil is when the sin condition causes us to act to exploit another person for your own benefit. And in every society of the world, regardless of whether they believe in God or not, the definition of evil is the same. Exploiting other people for your own selfish gain. It's evil. That's what it is. And it's the opposite of love, which seeks to uplift others, even if at your expense. And that's the opposite. So when you think about those principles, literally God's kingdom, truth, presented in love, leaving people free, watch the systems of the king of the north, king of the south. King of the south's principle, if we go with evolutionism and atheism, what is the law of evolutionism and atheism? What's the law? Survival of the fittest. The strong survive. And therefore, if you really believe that kingdom, and that's the way it works, then it is absolutely righteous for the strongest to abuse the weakest, to get their advantage, to pass their genetic code along. So when a bunch of Arabic men went into Somalia and began raping all the women, and they did it specifically, they said, so there would be more children born with Arab genetics. This is the king of the south. That's the survival of the fittest, passing their genome along so they can survive. That's a righteous act if that's your king, and that's the law of the universe. But God's kingdom doesn't work that way. That's actually antithetical. God's kingdom is greater love is no man that he give his life for a friend. It's the opposite of that.